Hey guys, so I am standing in for Jess on this video because we want to talk about one of the key features that makes the canine moto cockpit such an effective solution as a motorcycle dog carrier. There are a lot of carriers out there that allow the dog to be in a seated position or even standing, moving around freely within the footprint of the carrier. Our studies when designing the canine moto cockpit really concluded decisively that the laying position is by far the best for the dog, for their safety, their comfort, and in fact for their enjoyment as well. The laying position is also more effective for the rider. You're going to have a more stable ride, you're going to have a safer ride for yourself, and the laying position is better for the performance of your motorcycle. So let's break down each of these points, and as we do so, put yourself in the mindset, in the perspective of your dog, rather than from our human perspective. We're the dog that is sitting, standing, or laying down in their motorcycle dog carrier. What is that experience like? When the dog is stimulated, they are initially going to stand up. They're going to approach that stimulation. They're excited. If it's something that they can chase or pounce on or leap at, that standing position is their sort of stimulated, active, athletic position. So we naturally understand that standing position to be sort of the dog is happy. The dog is stimulated, and that's how they approach the stimulation, but that is not going to be a comfortable position for the dog over a long period of time. And we can simply see that in how our dogs normally behave, because even under high stimulation, at some point, that dog is going to sit down. Staying in a standing position is going to get tiring. Now, the dog will sit, and even sitting will get tiring after a time. That's why no matter how stimulated that dog is, after a time, your dog will end up in a laying position. That is, unsurprisingly, the most comfortable position for them. Now, we think that if they're laying down, they can't possibly be paying attention. Not the case. There are a lot of breeds of dogs that will crouch or come to a laying position as a way of focusing their attention on prey. Herding dogs, hunting dogs, this is their way of really not worrying about their body, being comfortable, and focusing all of their attention on what is at hand. Even as humans, we can understand that. You watch a movie about, snipers or whatever. The sniper is always in the laying position. They are focused on the target and awaiting that target over potentially a long period of time. So they can be maximally focused and not worried about discomfort or tiring their muscles. This is even more important for a dog when it comes to being in the carrier. As human passengers, we can grip the motorcycle with our thighs, and that connects us to the motorcycle. That connects our weight and our load to the motorcycle. We also anticipate the movements, which allows us to adapt appropriately, respond to those speed changes, go with the motorcycle, which makes for an easier ride for our rider. Your dog can do neither of these two things. So the dog's natural response to, movement, the ground is moving, they are going to stand and take that athletic position. Doesn't mean that's the best position, but a dog did not evolve to ride on a motorcycle. They evolved to deal with earthquakes and other sorts of dangers and hazards that require them to be in an athletic position and prepared to bolt to safety at a moment's notice. That's the standing position. But laying down is really not how a dog is going to approach stimulation, is going to approach a fear of uncertainty or danger. Laying down feels vulnerable. That does not mean that it's not the appropriate position or the safest position for them to be in. It just means that that's not how they will confront that uncertain situation. That's where restraining the dog in a laying position is better for their comfort, and as we've described, better for their focus, their attention, their ability to enjoy the sights, sounds, and smells of riding. Now let's put those pieces together and talk about safety. There is going to be less movement. The dog is not fighting for balance. They're not having to react to the movement of the motorcycle. They are in a laying position, which means they are being shifted around less. Their movements will be less erratic, which means that if they are thrust from one side to the other, they have far less distance to go. They're going to hit the sides of the carrier much more gently because there's less weight being thrown around. That is going to make them safer. By being lower they are not spending their time fighting for balance. They are calmer, they are more relaxed, their muscles are not tense, and that reduces the chances of any kind of injury. Now, this is a good moment to talk about different carrier design that you'll see, which is these sort of enclosed carriers. It's essentially taking some version of a kennel or crate and putting it on the back of your motorcycle. We as humans will see this and we think, wow, that looks really safe, because we think sort of more protection is safer. Instead, the result is usually the opposite, that you are taking your valuable vase, you're putting it inside of a hard box, and then moving the motorcycle around, and the vase essentially gets shaken around and smashes against the sidewalls, smashes against the top, and injury can occur. So enclosed carriers, at the very least, you want your dog in a laying position. In fact, in an enclosed carrier, it is even more important that your dog is in a laying position, because that movement that can occur when they're in a seated position, or even worse, a standing position, is going to smash them against the sides of that carrier. And I haven't at least come across any enclosed carriers where you have padded walls. Not that that sounds particularly enticing to me if I was the dog inside of a padded wall, crazy house, but that's essentially what's going to occur. Now, the other key point about the enclosed carrier design is, when are you actually going to use it properly enclosed like that? Almost never. If you're riding through a hailstorm, a massive thunderstorm, or some other type of riding conditions that you probably as the rider would prefer to sit out at the Starbucks or something with a hot latte. The rest of the time, that enclosed crate is going to get extremely hot and extremely stifling. It is like an oven with the sun beating down on it, and the dog is going to bake inside because generally they have no airflow. In order to combat that low airflow situation, most enclosed carrier designs include some sort of windows or hatches, latches, something that opens or slides and allows basically the dog to have a nice big opening. Again, from the human perspective, makes a lot of sense. Now they can get airflow. Well, they're still not getting that much airflow because they have you as the rider that is the windscreen right in front of them. It's already reducing the airflow that they're getting. But the next issue is, you've now created an enclosed box that had hard sidewalls, and you've converted that into hard edges or ledges. So now you have the dog sticking their head out of the window or the hatch or the opening that's been created, and their head is right there at the edges or ledges, and the head or the neck is smashing every time there is a speed change. So you have to grab some brake to stop for traffic, let alone an emergency stop, and that head or neck is being thrown forward into that hard ledge. Same happens when you speed up again. The dog is not anticipating your speed change. That head gets thrown backwards and smashes into the ledge at the opening of that hatch. Same happens side to side when you're leaning through a turn. They're getting smacked on both sides. Bad enough when it's a hard sidewall, but it's at least a lot of surface area. Much worse when that is a hard, unpadded edge or ledge that the dog is crashing against whenever there's a speed change. This can create an enormous potential safety hazard just under normal riding conditions, let alone what might occur when a crash scenario happens and the dog is being thrown around and potentially smashing those hard parts and hard ledges in a crash. Keep in mind that from the dog's perspective, more protection is not necessarily safer. Safer protection is safer. And safer protection generally means being in a laying position so that you are being moved around less, and it means having padded sidewalls, or better yet, tubes that pad those impact points, reduce the kind of damage that can occur from the carrier itself, which in most of these situations is actually the greatest source of threat. Okay, so we've talked about the dog's comfort, we've talked about their enjoyment, we've talked about the dog's safety. Now let's talk about your safety and comfort as the rider. Motorcycling is thrilling, it's an amazing experience, but that's because and when the motorcycle functions the way a motorcycle is supposed to function. As soon as that motorcycle feels top heavy, feels cumbersome, feels awkward, the enjoyment of motorcycling very quickly disappears, and you feel stressed, you feel strained, you feel anxious, you feel fearful, And we know that well because Jess and I did a lot of experimentation on the road towards developing the canine moto cockpit, and a lot of much more cumbersome, larger carriers that create conditions that we felt, despite being very experienced motorcyclists, was very, very unsafe and concerning to us as the rider. So when it comes to the laying position, we're achieving a couple of things that make this ride better for us as the rider. The dog laying down is going to move around less erratically. Most of the dog's body and load feels like a duffel bag. The head and front torso is like a very, very small human passenger. And really, it's the head that's the only thing that's doing any kind of substantial movement. You'll see in a lot of our on two wheels and four paws videos that Moxie picks a side. She likes the left side. She's leaning her head out. That is most all of the movement that she does. Every now and then, a sight or sound or smell will catch her attention, and she will shift her head to the other side. That is a sudden and erratic movement, but as far as sudden and erratic movements go, it is a very minimal one. And, you know, unless you are riding on really awful cobblestones or going really slowly on a difficult dirt road, it's not something that's really going to affect your ride at all. Reducing the erratic movements that can occur from the dog standing or sitting and being able to move around freely, that is going to make the ride feel more stable. It's going to make you feel more comfortable, more in control of your motorcycle. And the other thing to keep in mind about that is, when are those erratic movements likely to occur? The most likely time it occurs, and the times you will see Moxie's head whip to the other side when Jess is riding in our video series, is when she is leaning into a tight turn, she's on a mountain road, she's going through a blind curve, she's on an off-road and there's cows or goats or chickens on the side. It is specifically occurring when it is least opportune and most likely to upset your stability and your balance. So it is important that you are setting the dog's riding position for those scenarios, the tight turns, the twisties, that are going to allow you to maximize your pleasure and enjoyment of riding. You're not setting them up for straight shots on the interstate. That may be most of what your riding is, but it only takes a few twisties and a few country roads of feeling really unstable to say, forget it, I'm not going to ride with my dog, I'd rather take, the minivan. There's another key point about the laying position for your dog that makes it safer for you as the rider. And that is because you know that your dog is safer for all the reasons that we've already touched on. You are going to be safer in the event of a crash situation. The absolute most important thing, besides wearing all the gear all the time, is to understand that when the bike is crashing over, when it wants to go over, there's a point when you can no longer save it. Don't try and save a 400, 500, 600 pound motorcycle when it wants to go over. You are much more likely to do injury and harm to yourself trying to save and wrestle that motorcycle back to an upright position that it does not want to be in than you are to simply let it go, leap off, and stay clear of that crash situation. That is hard to do in the real world. Oh yeah, sure, I'm just going to let the motorcycle crash. But when you're actually out there, letting your bike crash and not trying to save it to the bitter end is really hard to do. It is even harder, much harder to do when your precious dog is on the motorcycle. Which means that the better you feel about your dog's safety, that they are in a safe, laying down, tight, compact position, the more likely you will be able to let that motorcycle crash when that time comes. You will get clear, you won't try to wrestle it down to the ground, you will be safer as the rider, leaping free from that crash situation, and for the reasons we described above, your dog will be safer as well. Now, the last factor that I want to discuss about what makes the laying position far superior to the sitting or standing position for your dog is how it affects the ride geometry or the performance of your motorcycle. The key points here are that the laying position lowers the center of gravity and better connects your dog's load or weight to the motorcycle itself. So we talked about how the human passenger better connects their weight to the motorcycle by hugging it with their thighs and by acclimating or adapting, anticipating the changes in speed and momentum. The dog can't do either of those things. But when the dog is in a laying position, they have more surface area that is touching and creating friction against the cushion of the carrier. That is connecting their load. There's less movement, there's less slippage. Their load is better connected to the motorcycle, which means they feel more like a part of the motorcycle rather than some kind of separate weight, separate entity that is on that motorcycle. The example here is how when you have a passenger and all of a sudden they swing their arm out to get a selfie or to point at something, or they whip their head around because they saw something and they forget for a moment that they need to kind of keep in the zone and not disrupt your ride. This is exactly what's happening when the weight is disconnected from the motorcycle, and the dog is doing that all the time when they are seated or standing. They're constantly moving around. That is disrupting your stability. It is disconnecting their weight from the motorcycle, and that creates instability and it degrades the ride performance. So the result is that when the dog is laying down, they are a more compact unit. The carrier itself is smaller, has a lower profile, is lighter, and yet it is still able to protect them better than a much larger, more encompassing carrier, and has less impact on the center of gravity and does less to degrade your ride performance. So the laying position is going to achieve better results under all circumstances. The physics and just the practical concepts here really apply under all circumstances. Short rides, long rides, straight rides, twisties, off-road, loose gravel, you name it, these concepts still apply. Where the benefits of the laying position are magnified is when you ride more, ride longer, and ride under more challenging conditions. And that's where we designed the Canine Moto Cockpit. It was designed for a large dog on a tall motorcycle under really challenging on and off-road conditions. The mountainous twisties, the blown out potholed tarmac, and really steep and challenging off-road conditions of Guatemala. So whether your plans are to do short rides down to Starbucks, day rides and local outings, or round-the-world motorcycle adventures, the key points here are the same. Your dog's going to be safer, more comfortable, better able to enjoy the experience. You're going to be better able to enjoy the experience, and your motorcycle is going to perform better when your dog is in the laying position. I hope you guys found that explanation helpful. We'll include a link to a really detailed article that we did about this exact topic in the show notes below. If you have any questions, reach out to us at goruffly.com, and don't forget to subscribe to us here at YouTube.